everyone. Thank you for joining us again today. These are going to be some small groups, so if you feel comfortable turning on your camera, go ahead and do so. We like to see everyone and have those conversations, but if you can't or you don't want to, that's okay too. We're going to get pretty quickly into our agenda here so that we can make sure that we stick to that hour time block. I'm going to go over a couple things that we went over last week very, very briefly. Most of you were here, but not all of you were. Then Julie's going to talk a little bit about some professional development and steps that we can take. And then we're going to break into those focus groups and begin that work. So first of all, welcome again. Thank you all for participating in this. We really appreciate it. If you don't know me, my name is Jeremy Shore. I do a lot of work along with Julie and Angie and some other folks, Keisha, for TIES. And I am kind of helping out in that MC role and also picking up today for Lakeisha Harding. Keisha is unable to join us today, so I am her focus group I'll be handling. But if she were here and when she's here in the future, Keisha is the PLC coordinator. She's helping keep this experience organized and focused on your needs. She'll be facilitating the college and career readiness focus group. That group, if you remember, is for mentors, pre-college training program facilitators, summer camp or intern facilitators, guidance counselors, anyone who wants to expose students to STEM fields, diversity within those fields, and prerequisite skills to be ready for both college and workforce. It's also a little bit of a catch-all group because the other two groups are a little more specific. We also have with us today Julie Hasfield, our professional development leader for this project for the entire group. She'll be facilitating the focus group for those of you using this to train teachers and or large groups of education facilitators. She'll help us focus on 4 aspects of pedagogy and practice used designing virtual STEM experiences that are meaningful and impactful. She'll explain the PD portion of the PLCs in just a moment. And I think the key or a key to Julie's work to keep in mind is that it is really relevant to this project with the Amgen Foundation and with LabXchange, but it really is beyond that too. These are just best practices that we'll be using within that platform, but aren't specific or exclusive to that platform. We also have Mary Lou and Jessica Silverman. I don't think Jessica's joining us today, but Mary's there, here with us from Harvard LabXchange. Later on in this session, they may do a LabXchange refresh if we need it, if there are questions. Mary's an educator and works closely with Jessica and the team, specifically from a classroom teacher perspective. They'll be facilitating the focus group for those of us delivering direct content to students, teachers, summer camp facilitators, tutors, other education facilitators working directly with students. So again, that first group with Julie are people who are working directly with educators, training teachers or training teacher trainers. Right, got that right. Mary and Jessica will be with the group who are working directly with students. And Keisha / this week, I will be working with the group that are out of school time or that don't kind of specifically fit into those other 2 groups. As always, if you don't mind sharing in the chat really quick where you're coming from. Also, if you have any questions during this first part, go ahead and add those in the chat as well. We do have a little bit of time this afternoon, for Mary to do a refresher if we need it. But if you have any questions about the outlay, about the plan, all of those things, go ahead and put those in the chat and we'll make sure to address those. And regardless, let us know where you're coming from, your organization, your state, and all of those things. Well, we talked a little more in depth about this last week, but we do want to do a really quick refresher on a PLC, what a PLC is, and in particular, what the PLC model is for our group, for those of you who are or aren't educators. As we see it, a professional learning community, a PLC, is a group of people who have agreed to learn and grow with one another towards a common goal. Right now, the goal we have is ensuring students have meaningful STEM experiences from home during and beyond this pandemic. Also, as we transition to more virtual learning experiences, beginning of next year, people are talking about blended and virtual and in-person and all sorts of mixtures in schools across the country. We understand what that means and how that changes systems of planning, learning, and assessing. We've partnered with Harvard and their LabXchange platform team to meet the needs of ecosystems right now. We've heard that you need learning materials now, whether you're leading a virtual summer camp or you're an administrator getting ready to in-service teachers or get them prepared for this new paradigm in education. We've heard that you need a tool for both in-school time and out-of-school experiences. And we've heard that you need and want a community to share ideas and resources. Before we flip over to Julie for her professional development, I just want to point out that I think the big key with the PLC component is two things to me. And Julie may have others, but the two things to me are, number one, that we want to make sure that our decisions, our teaching and learning are all data-based. But it's up to us to determine what those measures are that we'll be using. But we do want to make sure that we're measuring the success of the project and changing and iterating along the way to make sure we're reaching those goals. Perhaps most importantly, and the hardest part about a PLC in schools at least, is that this has to be a scenario where we all really feel comfortable saying things like, man, Julie, we both used this LabXchange tool last week and we both measured and my results were terrible. They were terrible. Julie, yours were really awesome. What did you do differently? That's really the power of a PLC, is to look at that data and be open about our own growth points and be willing to ask others for help so that we can all kind of continue and grow. So this is the things we'd like to keep in mind about PLCs as we move forward. And before we break into those focus groups, I think we're going to learn a little bit from Julie. Julie, how you doing?
Yeah, good. How are you? So I'm going to back up a little bit. So one thing I would just want to make sure that we all acknowledge is, this week, a lot of our colleagues of color are really, really struggling. And I just, I think anytime we do this sort of thing, we need to just make sure we're acknowledging that. Our own colleague, Lakeisha, needed some time this week. And so we're all picking up and doing what we can to support. So we appreciate the struggles that our colleagues are going through, and we at Tides are really committed to continuing our work to be an anti-racist organization, and that we need that to be at the forefront of a lot of our work here. So it looks like from the chat that there are a few people that are brand new to this. So I was wondering, even before we get going into this, let me give it just a high-level overview of what this is all about. So LabXchange is it's a platform that can be used to design virtual content for students, for faculty, for groups of people. And Mary, I'm going to let Mary give a little bit more information about that in just a sec. But what we've decided to do is take our ecosystem, put this out to the ecosystems and say, what would you like to get out of this platform? And so, again, like Jeremy said, we have, people that are interested in creating some virtual content on this platform for teacher leaders. Some people that are interested in creating content directly for students. I see some people in the chat that are teachers, and they are just, how do I use this to create content for students? And then there are some people that are interested in this, idea of after school or summer experiences or mentorships and things like that could be potentially virtual. So those are the three focus groups. So when you signed up for the Zoom call, you should have, the Zoom call today, you should have said which group you're interested in joining. So in a few minutes, we'll break into those separate groups, and we'll talk about what we want to really get out of this platform. But Mary, could you give maybe a better, just high-level overview of what LabXchange is all about for those people who are brand new? Just a minute or so.
Sure. LabXchange is both a repository of content, but also a great teacher tool. It enables you to create your own narrative and string together pieces of content that either you bring yourself or that you borrow from an existing library. You can remix and add to existing components there and actually deliver them as well through a private class that supports discussion boards and sort of an online community as well.
Great, thanks. So LabXchange has content that we can pull from, but we can also add our own content to it as well. So we have, you should have joined the you should have created a LabXchange account, and you should have joined the STEM Pedagogy and Practices group, and that's all of us. And then depending on which focus group you want to be a part of, there's another class for that. So if you haven't joined those yet, that's okay. I think Mary's going to be there in the background to keep adding you to the classes if you haven't joined already. But we can still move forward with what we want to do today without you getting into LabXchange at the moment. Jeremy?
Hey, Julie and Mary, I've got a quick question for you. Ginger's saying in a message, Ginger, I apologize for calling you out. It's okay though. She's saying, can I switch my small group? I think that I identified the group focus on students, but would prefer the district school-wide focus. I'm in all the focus group classes. So what's the answer to that? I mean, my gut is, yeah, you want to be in the group you want to be in. So if you just said something, then you can go ahead and switch. But what else do people need to do to make sure that they're signed up for everything correctly if they'd like to switch their focus group?
So I'll say, like, in the moment, like right now, if you entered into this Zoom call and you now were as at one focus group and now you want to change, if you'll just put a message in the chat, and Angie is going to take care of our breakout groups. Angie's on the call under STEM ecosystem. So Angie, if you'll just take a look at the chat and see if anyone wants to change their group, she'll put you in the right group for when we do our breakout. As far as LabXchange goes, I'll turn it to Mary on how to remove yourself from a class or change classes.
Yeah, you can certainly add as many classes as you'd like. Just adding the class content code means you can jump in and check in on conversations that are having there asynchronously.
And to that point, Julie mentioned last week that while your focus might be in one of the three, you can be a part of more than one of these groups. If your role is such that you touch kind of all of these different verticals, then it is absolutely okay to join more than one group.
Yeah, great.
Two other kind of related questions for you, Mary and Julie and Angie. Stacy's asking, where do we check to see which group we're in? It's a good question. And Mari is saying, how do we join a group? I'm not sure I'm necessarily even in a group yet. What do I need to do to join a group in the first place?
So if you, when you joined the Zoom call today, there was a survey, and the survey asked which group you wanted to join. If you didn't click on if you didn't answer the survey, again, just put it in the chat. And so there are three groups: district administrators, content, directly to students, and we'll call the next one summer experiences. Okay, so those are the three groups, and maybe Jeremy, if you could type in the chat there, maybe those three groups. And then if you want to put in the chat which group you actually want to be in, then Angie will get you situated for our conversation today to be in the right group. And then we'll follow up with some instructions on how to join the LabXchange course for that focus group. Again, we don't need to necessarily get into that today. I think there'll be some possible follow-up that you'll need to do in those courses as we determine what we want to do in these focus groups. But yeah, if you'll just put in the chat which group you want to be in: direct to students, district to admin, or summer experiences. We'll call it those three things. Okay, so it looks like people are doing that. So one thing that I really wanted to focus on with this group is, as we're designing this content, whether it's for teacher leaders or students or summer programs, we still want to be able to make sure that we're being true to our STEM pedagogy and practices. We want to be true to those things that we know are great STEM. And so I mentioned last week, sometimes when we do virtual online content, it can be just as rote as doing worksheets in a classroom. So we really want to make sure that we're thinking about those pieces that make learning effective and good. And so each week, I'm going to be focusing for just a few minutes on some ideas that I think are really effective for STEM, for thinking about designing for STEM. And so this first week we're going to be looking at design thinking and the engineering design process. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I feel like I need to stop for a minute. Are there any other questions before we move into the content piece here, the PD.
And if you have any questions, you can always put those questions in the chat. You also can just say in the chat, I have a question. We can unmute your microphone.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. How many of you are, and this is, well, see, and this, it's really hard to be interactive with this platform on Zoom, but if I could just maybe see a show of hands of, for those of you who are, who are to have your video up, how many of you are familiar with design thinking, the engineering design process? That's something that's really a part of what you do. Okay. And so how many of you, this is a new idea, like design thinking, engineering design? Okay, great, thank you. All right. So, hang on, let me get settled here with the screen share. I'm pretty new to Zoom myself, so, oops, there we go. So what do we know about design thinking? And, if we were does anybody want to raise their hand and share something about what they already know about design thinking, or how they've used it, or, what it is? And Jeremy, I can't really see. If there's somebody who's raising their hand, you can call on them.
Yeah, Ginger.
Human-centered design.
And can you, for folks who don't know that term, what does that mean to you?
What that means is that as we're solving problems, sometimes we can jump to solutions without thinking about who's involved, and hearing the voices and doing some work to find out what we need to know about the folks that we're designing a solution for. So it's really important to think about the end user, or to think about who is going to be using this product that we're designing, and doing a lot of work on the front end to know more about that user, so that we're designing with them in mind.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I at least, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that I think that dovetails really nicely with that PLC priority of focusing on the learning, not the teaching, that it's about what happens at the end.
Jennifer Gentry has a hand raised. We can get her on.
Yes, so I teach through a science program called Day of Discovery. So we don't have a lot of standards that we have to follow. We do a lot of creative thinking, and we use engineering design for the students who are just more interested in problem solving than looking for answers to questions. So there's that just really appeals in a slightly different way to some of the students.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, so it sounds like there's already a lot of experience with this. So I'm just going to share a quick study, and some of you may be familiar with this. I'm sure a lot of you have done this challenge, the Marshmallow Challenge. And, it's just one of these design challenges. There's 20 sticks of spaghetti, a yard of tape, a yard of string, one marshmallow. You have teams of 4 people. They have 18 minutes to design a structure that can support a marshmallow. So I'm sure everyone here has done that. What you may not know is the research that's gone behind this. So this challenge was created by a man named Tom Luzek, and he's led teams of people in doing this all over the world, and has some interesting results that have come out of this. So I thought I'd share just briefly some of the things that he found. So typically over the 18 minutes, this is how groups approach it. They kind of orient themselves to the task. They do some planning. They spend most of their time doing the actual build of the Marshmallow Challenge. And then at the last second before the time is up, they add their marshmallow to the top. And ta-da, they're done. But most of the time, it's not a ta-da, it's an uh-oh. So they have waited to the last second, they put it on, oh, it didn't work. So in this task, he's done this with groups all over the world, with CEOs, with college students, with K-12 students. Who do you think consistently performs poorly at this task? Who does the worst? Ideas?
This is Lisa. Our high academic achievers tend to struggle the most. Those that perform well on the standardized tests all the time, the A students.
Yep. Yep. Other thoughts?
Sabrina's got her hand raised. Sabrina?
I also would think like maybe adults would struggle more than children would.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So he narrowed it down a little bit tighter on that, but he said that there's a group that just consistently does really, really awfully. And this group is recent graduates of business school. So, and again, you can think about like what Lisa said, and, you know, the adults do perform less well than kids, but, you know, recent graduates of business schools, they probably are those A students. So the ones that are really good at, you know, getting, you know, following the rules and getting good grades, and maybe not as good at, you know, thinking creatively. So you all kind of got there a little bit already, but who consistently performs well? We know kids. So can we drill that down a little bit better on who consistently performs the best at this challenge? And I'll go ahead and give it away here. So recent graduates of kindergarten perform best, with the exception of engineers and architects. They actually do pretty well, which is a good thing. But besides that, recent graduates of kindergarten do really, really well. So, you know, the question is why? Why do kindergartners do so much better than lawyers, business school students, or just, you know, the average adults? What are some thoughts on that? Why do you think that they do so well?
We could just start unmuting people, Julian.
It's all right. You know, again, I'm getting used to this new format as well. It's very different than being in front of a group of people. But I'll go ahead and jump in here.
Hey, Julian,
Yeah.
the chat, Mari's saying they haven't been told they can't enough in their short life as of yet. And
Yeah.
Bobby's saying not fearing to fail in the chat.
Exactly. But then we can also, what he found is that there was a way that the kindergartners were approaching this differently than the business school students. And so again, we saw that most people, they design, they build, and then they don't test until the very end. But what he noticed about the kindergarten students is that they were doing constant iteration. They were failing fast. So they would try it and fail, try it and fail, try it and fail. And by going through that engineering design process over and over again very quickly, they were able to be successful. And so that brings us to, you know, the purpose and the, you know, why we want an engineering design process. We know that, and I'll point out here, this is Ty's engineering design process. Every organization, company has their own version of a design process. We call it an engineering design process because we're in STEM fields. But when I work with schools and districts, I mostly use the term design process. I take the word engineering out so that it's a little bit more open. But the idea is we're identifying a problem and we are creating solutions. And there are multiple ways that we can, methods we can do that with. I'll show you another one that I like a lot. I think Ginger kind of touched on this one. This is a more human-centric design, the Stanford design model. And you'll notice that first step is to empathize. And so, you know, before even identifying the problem, we have to understand the problem. We have to do those interviews and seek to understand what is going on. And then we can define those problems. So these are just two models. Again, there's a bunch of different models out there. And so just some considerations for the focus groups as we break out is, you know, which process makes sense for your virtual learning design. So, you know, if you're thinking about district level PD, or if you're looking at summer experiences, which of these models, you know, would you be interested in using? And then how can you use a design process yourself while designing virtual content. So how can we make sure that we are iterating as we're creating things for teachers, for students? And then how can you ensure that your users are also using a design process as they engage with virtual learning? So how are you ensuring that they are, that you're not just delivering rote content, but they are also getting a chance to experience design, iteration, failure, that's intentional and part of the learning process. So I'm going to stop there. And are there any other questions or thoughts before we move into focus groups? Okay. Angie, are we all good with getting people into the right focus groups?
We are all set. Dana Williams and Deborah Holmes, I just need to know what groups you both would like to be on, and then we're good. If they are on.
This is Deborah, and I'm in the district implementation.
The district, perfect. Okay, I've got you in there. And then also, if you want to switch in between, just you can send a chat or let your group leader know, and we can move you back and forth if needed. But okay, so I think we're set.
Okay, so I think that, Angie, if I'm correct, participants don't need to do anything. They'll
Correct.
just automatically be, we're just gonna say go, we'll split into groups. Let's
Yep.
spend about, it's already 12:30, so let's just spend about 20 minutes in groups, and me and Jeremy and Mary will communicate through text if we feel like we need to end sooner or have a few more minutes. And so the goal of these focus groups is, first of all, we want to find out who everybody is, what your role is, and what you're really looking for with virtual content. And then we also want to come out of this with some action steps to know what we want to do next to move us in that direction. So whether that might be looking for resources to add content to our LabXchange course that we have, for our focus group, or something else. We need to think about what are the next steps. Okay, so anything else, Jeremy, before we split? Okay.
Not for me.
All right, we'll see you in our specialized groups.
Thanks, Julie.
Thanks.
To appear in the class content, then that's something that the moderator, that you would have to do. But you could
Okay,
put
so
the
then
links to content in the discussion boards.
Okay, so let's do that. So for my group, we talked about what we're going to have for next week, and so let's put it in the discussion board. So if you go to the discussion board for our course, you can put that into put a link in the discussion board, and then I'll pull that into the course itself. Yes. And are we all back, or are we still waiting?
I think everyone's back, but the timer ran out. Ashley was sharing amazing things and got cut off by the timer. So I think everyone's back now.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I thought we'd just take a minute and talk about what each group talked about. It sounds like we ended up only having 2 groups today. Is that correct, Jeremy?
No, well, it was a
okay.
It was a
Was it a
small
group of 2?
group, but a powerful group. Lori, you can jump in if you want to, but I'll do my quick summary. Lori from OC STEM and Ashley from Amgen, it's just the 3 of us. Lori has this really, the conversation started with career exploration, which is a project that Lori's working on. Where it's sort of developed to, though, is that there's this national issue where we have students go into career exploration experiences, mentorships, internships, out of high school. And some students come from, it's an internship in additive manufacturing. And some students come from a high school with a fab lab and a course and all these things, and some students don't. And some students have safety components and design components, and some students don't. So when students get there, they're not always or even usually equally prepared. And so what we discussed is Lori working with some partners she has in biochem to really delve into what are the skills gaps between participants, and then build a pathway that's kind of an on-ramp to that internship. That's a combination of how to work in a lab, how to do basic research, biochem specific modules and background pieces, safety components, all of the things that they might not have that some of their peers might, to level the playing field a little bit. Lauren, did I miss anything on where we kind of delved? I got a thumbs up, so I don't think so.
So our group talked about how we can, the real need is for district level administrators is providing resources to show how online learning can be effective. We talked about how it is such a switch from traditional teaching methods. So what we're going to do before next week is gather some resources on models of effective virtual learning. We also talked about mindset, the importance of having an open and habits of mind that can lead to effectively developing online virtual content, being open-minded to this new way of learning, new way of teaching. And then we're also going to invite some teachers, some users to join our PLC next week to share their struggles and challenges. And so we can make sure that what we're creating is effective for them. Did I miss anything with our group? Okay. All right. And Mary, what did you all discuss?
We were really looking at the nitty-gritty of how to keep students engaged in a sort of virtual place, and how to sort of gather and distribute content that we might already have but are anticipating needing to deliver it in this virtual setting. We looked at some of the components of the platform directly, particularly pathways and the class feature, and we're working through how to use those.
Perfect. Okay, so for next week, I think we all, I know my group is clear on, what we're doing prior to next week. We'll do the same thing. We'll meet all together, and then I'll go over one piece of, what, good STEM pedagogy and practice. And then we will break into focus groups again and continue this work in our courses. Anything else before we close up for the day? Any comments, questions, confusion? I know I answered one question. If you aren't in the LabXchange courses, we'll send out a follow-up email. But there is a class code you need to get into the LabXchange course. So we'll make sure that you have that if you haven't already joined LabXchange. Any other questions, comments? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy, you want to close it up?
I don't really have anything else other than we'll see you guys all again next week. And we're looking forward to it, and really try to think about what those next steps are. We know everyone is busy. This isn't always possible, but the more that we can come to these sessions with specific questions and specific tasks that have been completed or can be completed in the call, the more we'll really move forward and kind of grow the work. So to the extent that it's possible, please do that, and we'll see you all in a week.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good to see you.